And we are live with today's pre-show of our N10-009 Network Plus Study Group. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Well, I like the where am I joining from, then the map went kind of funky there. I'm not sure what happened there. If that happened on my side, that was on your side. If it's just something in general, I don't know. Let's see if we show the results, hide the results. So the results show up. Let's see if there's always little things, right? This is why we do a pre-show for those of you joining in. For those of you who are live, hello, chat room. This is where we get the bugs out of the system about 10 minutes before going live, and we see how this goes. I'm going to stop the poll and then restart the poll. Yeah, that worked. So there you go. Good to see everyone. Thanks for joining us. It's all Network Plus today. Today it's a little different because it's the Network Plus 009. It's the newer version, which, to be fair, doesn't change that much from the older version, but there are some new topics and there are some that were dropped off. So we are adjusting things for the latest version, which is now out. It's been out for a number of months since June 20th, July 3rd, 20th, somewhere in there. It all blends together after a while. But it's been out for a number of months. And of course, the 008 will be retired on December the 20th. So I got that date right. The 008, though, we have so many. We have 3 years of study groups you can go back and watch. So we have plenty of content if you're still studying for the 008. Plus, a lot of the questions we do today will still apply to the 008. So if you're here and you've been studying for the 008 and you've shown up and you realize, oh, this says 009, do not worry. I guarantee you will get something out of what we do today. These are not all singularly or exclusively 009. So that part's good. We've got all new questions as well. I always write new questions for every study group. I'm not sure everyone realizes that. Sometimes I will get an email that says, will the next study group just be the same thing just a month later? No. The format is the same. I ask you questions, you answer. But the process of getting the questions ready is something that is new every month. So I build these new questions every month myself, just so we have something new that we can go through, which is kind of nice. Well, we've got a lot to go through today. So it's always fun, though. When I'm putting together the questions, I'm always wondering, will this be a hard one? Will it be an easy one? Will everyone get this one right? I have my own predictions, and they're almost always wrong. So that's pretty normal for me. Don't ever follow me if you're trying to figure out how to make money, how to optimize, how to beat the market, how to do. Just follow me if you want to know the opposite. So do the opposite of what I do, and you'll be fine. It's kind of how those things work out. How are we doing camera-wise? Laptop's not on. Let's click that button. Boop. There we go. Love it. These look good. That looks good. I've got, let's see what else we got here. That looks fine. Probably put these over here. I think we're in pretty good shape, everybody. Oh, I didn't check our stats yet. Looking at this, we got our 3% cash, which is exactly where it should be. If that number goes up, that means that things are not going well on the internet. Right now, things are going well on the internet. We're sending YouTube about 6 megabits per second. That's megabits per second. And that is what they are receiving from me. They're receiving I don't think I'm sending them 4K. I think I'm sending them 1080. No, my input is 4K. I'm looking at the stats here. You can kind of see a number of stats. That says that my input is 2160, but the stream standard, which you can't see because my finger's in the way there, is 1080p at 29.97 frames per second, which is exactly what I was hoping for. So that all worked out lovely. We have, and the reason I don't send 4K to YouTube is because the process, what happens is when I send the video signal to YouTube, I'm sending them a single stream. So you're not seeing the stream. You're technically not seeing my stream. Technically, YouTube is seeing the single stream from me, and then they will re-render the stream into a format that is most appropriate for where you are watching. So if you're on a mobile device, you'll get mobile device video. If you're on a larger screen, you'll get larger screen video. So there is a bit of a delay there, and that amount of delay depends on the video signal that I'm sending to YouTube and what I've told them to do with it. So what's fortunate though is that by sending them 1080p, well, 1080p video re-rendering takes seconds. It's really, really fast. So you're seeing the stream maybe 10 seconds behind, which is great because this is really more of an interactive back and forth. So it's always nice if we can make sure that everybody is, when I ask a question, that everybody hears it so that they can respond. Otherwise, we're sitting here a lot of the time waiting on a response. If I was to send 4K video and have them update the 4K, it takes about 30 seconds, which means it takes a while once I ask a question to ever see anything happening. And since this is more of an interactive stream, it just makes sense to have 1080p. Plus, we're not doing anything here that's incredibly highly graphical. There's nothing very detailed. So I think everybody can follow along, and it looks pretty good at 1080p. So until they speed things up a bit, that's just how it's going to be. I was going to look at, I can't see the configuration here. I was going to look at the config. I really should do some additional testing because occasionally they will update hardware behind the scenes. They'll update processes. And then I'll do a stream and realize, oh, it's much faster now. So I haven't done a 4K test in about a year. Oh, can I explain this setup? There's a bunch of screens and some buttons. Yes, that's exactly what we got going on here. This is an Axia console. That is what you were seeing there. It's kind of hidden behind my mic there. But yep, you can find everything that we have here in front of me is on the website already. You can go to professormesser.com. And at the bottom of the screen is a link to our studio, or you can simply go to professormesser.com/studio. So there you go. That's how all that works. Does the stream go UDP? The stream as YouTube is sending it to you probably is, unless they're, I think they switched over everything to UDP a number of years ago. There's a fast streaming protocol that they use. They used to do just HTTPS, so everything was TCP, and then switched over this faster streaming protocol, which was a big difference in performance for them on their side. You don't have to worry a lot about the overhead associated with TCP because you don't need it. So that part is good. We got about 2 minutes and a few seconds before we get things started. We'll start at the top of the hour. This is not the live stream yet. I guess it is technically the live stream, but we're not doing anything yet. We're getting there. Do I have everything ready to go here? I do. We are recording. I've already done my podcast intro. You missed all that. It's so fun. You'll have to listen to the podcast, hear that. Audio looks good. Check. We've got everything potted down except the mic. Video looks good. All of our video inputs are where they should be. So far, so good. So far, so good. Ewok but smaller says these study sessions are the closest thing to actual CompTIA questions that I've seen. Well, that's sort of the idea. Technically, I'm not writing them to emulate an actual exam question, but because I write so many questions, like for my Q&A books, that focus on the style and tone of the exam, I try to use the same style and tone when I write any question. So that's sort of how we ended up here. Is that process, because there are some strategies that CompTIA uses in their questions. There are strategies with how they ask the question, multi-steps that they use. There's certain questions they do not use. For example, they've stopped using not questions. For example, they will never ask you, which of the following is not the right answer? You'll notice you don't get any of those in the exam anymore. They don't write those anymore. For whatever reason, I don't know their thought process behind writing the questions, but there are styles of questions and techniques they use within a question to make you think about what the answer is, or to make it a little more difficult to get to that final answer. And I try to put those into the study groups, into the pop quiz questions, and hopefully someday in the future, we'll have a Q&A book, a practice exams book for Network Plus, and I can do the same for that as well. Well, we're at the top of the hour, so at that point, I think we should start up Keynote. We should look for a green light. We have one. We hit the play button. No, it's not only one answer is wrong. It's that they ask a question where only one answer is the wrong one. They ask you to choose the one that does not apply, which are just bad questions. It's confusing. Pick the right answer, which is the one that is not the right answer. I think that's probably why they got rid of them. And well done, I think. Let's do a live stream, everybody. Here we go. And let's get rid of the lower third. Now we can start the live stream. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the September 2024 Professor Messer N10-009 Network Plus Study Group. I say the N10-009 because this is our first 009 specific study group. Previously, we've done the 008, so this will be the day that we transition over into the 009 series. However, if you are here for the 008 content, you will find that a lot of this is very similar between the exams. So you can probably still follow along with us live, and you will still get plenty of information out of this live event. During these live streams, I will ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives, and you will answer these questions online live if you happen to be here watching. Another great reason to tune in for our live streams. If you want to know when the next live stream is going to be, you can simply go to professormesser.com/calendar. I think there's some other links that I put in there to get you to the calendar, but that's a good place to go if you're looking to do that. If you are here live, the way that you could join us and participate is to follow the link that's on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. This is the link that will bring up a service that we use called Vevox. I don't name these things, people. That's the name of it. Vevox is the name. So if you see that coming up on your screen, you're in the right place. That's what we're doing. And if you go to professormesser.com/QA, there will be a question waiting for you in this Vevox front end. And I see now on my screen, I have a different question on my screen than you are ready to see on your screen. So I'm going to show you this question. I wonder if I thought about this beforehand or if I didn't. We're about to find out. This question, we're going to see if you can get into Vevox and use this, because this is a question from a previous study group, just to see if we can get in and do this properly. And you should see this question on your screen that says, all network flows for an application are within the same data center. Which of the following would best describe these traffic flows? Would it be east-west, SD-WAN, single mode, unicast, or stratum? Now, the one rule that we have for our live streams is that we do not answer in the chat room, and there's no hints in the chat room, which means you have to answer this somewhere. And I put a link right here on your screen. You can go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. That's the one link you'll need to know for this entire group. You just stay on that page, and the questions will change as we go. So we will come back to this question in just a moment. See if you can lock in your answer and be able to know what that happens to be. We will circle back and answer that question in just a bit. Well, thank you for being here. We do one of these study groups every month. And of course, when we have our entire Network Plus course available for you to watch for free on the YouTube, simply go to professormesser.com/YouTube. You can go to our playlists. And I think what I'm going to do is make the N10-009. I just need to update this graphic to the 009 version. The 009, I want to put this into a new feature from YouTube called a YouTube course. And so you might see it in a different area of our YouTube page under courses. I'll put it at the very top so that we can always find them. But those courses are there to help you kind of follow your path through the training sessions. We have so many different videos, so be looking for that on the YouTube. Hopefully that works out okay. If it doesn't work out okay, I'll take it out of the YouTube courses. We'll figure that out. When we are not here doing a live stream, you can always find us on the YouTube. You might even want to subscribe to that channel at professormesser.com/YouTube. And of course, we have our weekly Network Plus pop quiz question. You can find that on the service formerly known as Twitter by going to professormesser.com/Twitter or professormesser.com/Instagram. There are 2 Network Plus exams that you could take right now. Now, you only need to take one. So don't worry, for those of you suddenly concerned that there are two exams. No, you only need to take one of these. Now, the first exam you could choose is an exam called the N10-008. This was an exam that was released in September of 2021, and this exam will be retired on December the 20th of this year. Now, that means that after December 20th of 2024, no more N10-008. So if you have been spending your last number of months studying to take this specific version of the Network Plus exam, please make sure you do that and pass the exam by December the 20th, because after that date, you can't take this exam any longer. The exam itself is 90 minutes long. You could get a maximum of 90 questions. You'll often get fewer than 90, but 90 is where it will max out. And the score we're looking to get on a scale from 100 to 900 is a 720. The exam consists of both multiple choice-based questions and performance-based questions. We'll talk about performance-based questions in just a bit. Now, for those of you that have now started your studies with Network Plus, you're probably starting with the N10-009 version of the exam. The N10-009 was released on June the 20th of 2024, so just a number of months ago. It is estimated to retire somewhere in the fourth calendar quarter of 2027. So if you're starting your studies now with your Network Plus, this is probably the version you'll want to take so that you don't hit that deadline in December. And you've got plenty of time before this exam is ever retired, just in case something happens in life with your world and you need to delay things. You don't have to worry about missing an opportunity. This is also a 90-minute exam, 90 questions on the exam as a maximum. The score is exactly the same. So the format is the same. The structure is the same. Everything about this exam very similar to the previous version, but there are some topics that were added in the latest version. There were some topics that were removed from the previous version to where we are today. So it's not exactly the same. So I always recommend that you study from materials that match the version of the exam that you're planning to take. If you're going to take the N10-009 exam, you should be studying from materials that are specifically written for the N10-009. If you're taking the N10-008 exam, all of your study materials should be for the N10-008. Make sure those sync up, because there might be a little bit of a difference, enough of a difference that it could absolutely affect your final score, and we do not want that to happen. We, of course, have videos and content available on our website. You can go to ProfessorMesser.com and find our Network Plus Success Bundle, downloadable videos. We have audio versions of these videos available. We have a course notes. We'll talk about all of these in just a bit, but that is another way that you can help support what we do here, and it would give you some content that you can use for your studies. That's a win-win in my book. Find out more about that at ProfessorMesser.com. There is a replay of this video immediately available after we are done today. It's on our website or on YouTube. And we also have an audio-only version I create that I distribute in a podcast format. A lot of people have podcast listening programs built into their mobile devices. And if you're someone who travels, you're working out, you just want to listen in to the live stream, you can do that by visiting ProfessorMesser.com/podcast and subscribing from that page. We also are on a number of popular streaming audio sites. So if you're on Spotify, for example, you can simply search for Professor Messer and you will find all of our podcasts available on that streaming platform. And if it's not on your favorite streaming platform, just tell me and we'll find a way to get it over to that platform as well. Usually about a day later, you will notice that the YouTube video description will be updated with timestamps. These timestamps don't happen magically or automatically. These timestamps are put in by my marketing manager, Lori, who's watching the replay. Hi, Lori. She's going through this entire video, probably at 2x speed, and putting in all of these timestamps for you so you can go back years with these live streams and find exactly the information you happen to want to find. This is all indexed. You have every question, not only during the first hour, but in our after show as well. It's something that can help you learn just a little bit faster. And that's what we're trying to do here, is make this process as easy as possible. Eventually, you'll probably want to talk with some other folks about the things that you're learning, or maybe you have questions about some of the things you're going through with Network Plus. We have an amazing community of people over on our Discord. We'd love for you to join us. It's absolutely free. Go to professormesser.com/Discord and you can join us. You can ask questions of other people who are studying for their Network Plus exam. We've got a lot of people that will start up a live stream on our Discord and go through questions, watch videos together. It's a great way to get immediate feedback from people who are working towards the same goals that you are. You can find all of this on our Discord at professormesser.com/Discord, or use the social media icons in the upper right of our website. There will be a point where you will want to take this exam and you will need to give CompTIA some money so that you can take this exam. There is a way to make this process a little bit less expensive, though, because I have discounted vouchers on the Professor Messer website. If you happen to be in the US or Canada or US territory, you can find those by going to professormesser.com/vouchers. Not only do you get the vouchers at a discounted rate, so you're already saving money from the CompTIA website, but I also give you something you can't get anywhere else, and that's a copy of my Exam Hacks ebook. I've written an ebook with all the tips and tricks that I've accumulated through the years for studying and taking these exams. In fact, there are tips and tricks in this book that can help you while you're taking the exam itself. And who wouldn't want to get a few extra points in the middle of an exam? That's something that might help you, and it's something that's given to you for free when you purchase a voucher from my website. This is not sold separately. The only way you can get your hands on this is to have my Success Bundle or to have a voucher from my site, something you can find at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's go back. This was not the question I asked. Well, that was actually the question I asked earlier. Finally got to the right screen. Here's the one that I asked earlier, which asked, all network flows for an application are within the same data center. Which of the following would best describe these traffic flows? Would it be east-west, SD-WAN, single mode, unicast, or stratum? Let's stop the poll and see how you did with this one. And we can see that about 60% of you say the answer is east-west. And then it drops down to 15% for unicast, 8% for single mode, 8% for SD-WAN, and 6% for stratum. Whenever we talk about data flows within a data center, we often have to describe where data starts and where data ends. That's an important concept when you're trying to communicate to other people where this data is going. You obviously can't look at a network cable and see where the data is going. You would have to connect some type of analysis tool, be able to understand what the packet captures are, or at least have an understanding of the way an application happens to work, and to have knowledge of the IP addresses in your environment. If the traffic is starting in your data center and ending in your data center, it's all self-contained within that data center, we refer to that as east-west traffic. And if this is something where the data is leaving your data center, either it starts from the outside and comes inbound, or it's starting inside of your data center and going outbound, we refer to that as north-south traffic. So those are the two different terms you will often hear us describe when we're talking about the way the data is flowing, because this will help us understand where this data is coming from. Do we need to provide a different level of security to this data? Is there a certain bandwidth restriction or some other type of communication delay that we need to take into account? That may be the case if it's north-south traffic. It may not be the case if it's east-west traffic. So knowing where the traffic begins and where the traffic ends can be very valuable, especially if you're planning around understanding, troubleshooting, or securing that particular application. So for those of you that are familiar with the traffic flows, you know that's exactly how you would describe it in a data center. If it's staying in the same data center, that indeed it is east-west traffic. And 60% of you got that one absolutely right. And it looks like people are able to get into the Vevox and answer the questions. And that's exactly what we were hoping for. Let's do some new questions, though. And as many of you know, on these live study groups, I like to have the very first new question be a performance-based question. Performance-based questions are a handful of questions you will get at the very beginning of your exam. A lot of you are familiar with multiple choice. We just did a multiple choice question. There was a question and there were multiple responses that you could choose from. And you could have even guessed on that last one. There were 5 options, which means you had a 20% chance of getting the points, even if you didn't really know what the answer was. Well, CompTIA wants to test you a little bit better than that. They want to see if you really know your stuff. So the first handful of questions you get on your exam will not be multiple choice. Well, if they're not multiple choice, what are they? Well, they're anything but. So they could be fill in the blank, they could be matching, they could be a drag and drop question, they could be a question where you have to put things in a particular order. Whatever they want to ask, in whatever style they want to ask, that's a performance-based question. But one thing that is known, the known quantity of the performance-based question, is that all of the topics in these questions come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. So they're not going to ask you something you've never heard of. They're not going to ask you something you weren't expecting. These are all topics that you've already been studying. These are all topics that you already know. And in my mind, as long as you know the content, it really doesn't matter how they ask the question. You will be able to answer it. And I think you'll find that that's the case with this question as well. So I have for you today a matching question. Today's performance-based question is one about DNS record types. And I want you to match these DNS record types. I have 7 record types on the screen. In fact, all 7 of these are the 7 you need to know for the Network Plus exam. They are NS, CNAME, PTR, Quad A, MX, text, and A. Those are the 7 record types. And I have for you 4 different scenarios. So I want you to match these different descriptions or scenarios to these record types. Well, if there's 4 scenarios, 4 descriptions here, then you're only going to use 4 of these 7. There will be 3 left over at the end. So another concept, another topic, that's another method that CompTIA uses for asking questions on these exams to make it just a little bit more difficult. The 4 different scenarios are: identify the IPv6 address of an FQDN. Determine the authorized email IP address for a domain. Locate the DNS server IP addresses for a domain. And resolve the name of a device using an IP address. What are the DNS record types that would match those 4 specific scenarios? And of course, you need to match them to one of these 7: NS, CNAME, PTR, Quad A, MX, TXT, and A. Got a number of options there. Again, they are: identify the IPv6 address of an FQDN, determine the authorized email IP addresses for a domain, locate the DNS server IP addresses for a domain, or resolve the name of a device using an IP address. Now, if you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to follow the link that is on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. So all I'm looking for in this particular case is 4 of these. So if you think they are already in the right order, you could say it's 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's all we're looking for as part of these answers. Just remember what answer you put in there, because it will be it'll be hidden from you once you submit the answers. We'll have to figure out if that's something that you can think about doing. If you're ever in the process of putting these things together, especially with DNS, this can be a bit of a challenge, because DNS has these, well, there's more than 7 record types for DNS, but the 7 that I have here are the record types that we need to know for the exam. So that's why these 7 happen to be listed. It just happened to be that there were 7. So it worked perfectly for this particular question, because I wanted to give you more possible answers than the actual number that you needed, because of course that is one of the things that you can expect on the exam itself. They often have a strategy of that. So now that we have a number of you that have submitted your answers, let's step through each one of these and see if I can really understand or break down what the different answers might be for all of these. So let's look at the very first DNS record type that we have here. It is identify the IPv6 address of an FQDN. FQDN is a fully qualified domain name. So something like www.professormesser.com is a fully qualified domain name. So what would the IPv6 address be of www.professormesser.com? Well, the record in DNS that provides you with that information is the quad A record. This is an address record, but to designate it that it's a different address record than an IP version 4 address record, we specify that it is a quad A record or AAAA record. If you were looking for an IPv6 address of a fully qualified domain name, then you would be looking for simply an A or address record. For IPv6, it's always quad A. So in this particular case for IPv6, that's the type of record we would need. And that was the fourth option, quad A. Next on our list is determine the authorized email IP addresses for a domain. This can be very useful, of course, because we need to limit people being able to send email with our username or email address associated with it. We want to stop the amount of spam that is on the internet, and we don't want somebody pretending that they're us, spoofing that they happen to be our email address when in reality they are not. And one way you can do that is to specify in your DNS what mail servers are authorized to send mail on your behalf. The type of DNS record that you would add that information to is a text record or TXT. Text records are very useful, very versatile records. You could put almost anything into a text record. If you have a third party that wants to validate that you indeed have control of your DNS, they might ask you to add a text record to your DNS just to be able to prove that you are who you say you are or that you have control of that DNS. And for the type of email records like an SPF record, that would go into the text records of your DNS. So determining the authorized email IP address for a domain is indeed the TXT. Next one on our list is locate the DNS server IP addresses for a domain. This is obviously an important address because if we are trying to find www.professormesser.com, then we need to find the professormesser.com name server. Well, the way that you would find that name server is through a record in a DNS called the NS record, which oddly enough stands for name server. That's what that one is. So this is a extremely important record to have in a DNS. Otherwise, they will never find your DNS if you don't have a name server record. So absolutely have that available. Locating the DNS server IP addresses for a domain is the NS or name server record. And the last one is resolve the name of a device using an IP address. This is a little bit backwards to what we often think about with a DNS server. For DNS, we're often giving it a fully qualified domain name. I'm looking for www.professormesser.com, and then the DNS server gives us the IP address, and then we can connect directly to that web server. But what if we wanted to reverse that? What if we had the IP address and we wanted to know what is the fully qualified domain name associated with that IP address? DNS servers can do that as well. And the way that you would do that in a DNS record is there needs to be a specific record in the DNS that provides that reverse resolution. That's what we refer to that as, is a reverse lookup. And it's through a type of record called a pointer record, a PTR. Pointer record is what provides that specific conversion between IP address back to a name. And you have to have that. It doesn't happen automatically. In fact, one of the things you'll find is you might look up, give me the IP address for www.professormesser.com, and then you'll also ask the same DNS server, now give me the name that you have for that IP address. You may find that two different names come back because one of the names is in an A record, the other name is in a pointer record. So that's where that differentiation comes from. That's where that difference is whenever you ask those two questions, which you think would be the same answer, but very often are not the same answer for many different reasons. And in fact, if you were to do that for www.professormesser.com, you would absolutely get a different answer for both of those. And that's by design. So those are the different record types we're looking for. Identifying the IP version 6 address of a fully qualified domain name is a quad A record. Determining the authorized email IP addresses for a domain is a text record. Locating the DNS server IP addresses for a domain is a name server record. And then resolving the name of a device using an IP address is a pointer record. We obviously did not use the CNAME record, a canonical name. We also didn't use an MX record, that is a mail exchanger record. And we did not even use the A record. We've already talked about what that happens to be. But all 7 of these are listed in the N10-009 exam objectives. Make sure you are very familiar with them. If you don't recognize one of these or you want more information about these, they are all in the video in section 3.4, the video name aptly called DNS records. That can help you with the process that you are working through. Let's now shift gears back to multiple choice. That was our performance-based question of the month. But of course, I have more questions for you. This next one is a multiple choice question, and it asks, a company receives alert messages each time a switch interface shows an error. Which of the following ports must be added to the firewall to allow these alerts? Is the answer 162, 443, 143, 25, or 22? Just a bunch of numbers. The question again asks, a company receives alert messages each time a switch interface shows an error. Which of the following ports must be added to the firewall to allow these alerts? Is the answer 162, 443, 143, 25, or 22? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. You instead want to go to that particular link to lock in what you think the answer is. A lot of people locking in their answers on this one, although to be fair, it's 5 numbers. You probably either know it or you don't, or you're taking a guess. And there's not a lot to read through with the answers on this one. Port numbers are an important part of this exam. Some of you may have seen these port numbers already on the A+ exam, but in the world of networking and in the world of technology, we use port numbers all the time. We're looking at port number configurations when configuring an application. Port numbers are part of a server configuration. Port numbers are listed in firewall configuration. You run across port numbers all the time. You're looking through a trace file, you're looking through a protocol decode, there will be port numbers in there. And it's important that you're able to pick out very quickly what those port numbers might be referring to. And indeed, all of these port numbers are from the exam objective. So if you're looking at the port numbers on your screen and you can't list out what one of those is, you might want to make a note of that so that you can go back to the exam objectives and see what that one happens to be. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asks, a company receives alert messages each time a switch interface shows an error. Which of the following ports must be added to the firewall to allow these alerts? Is it 162, 443, 143, 25, or 22? Let's see what you chose. We'll close the poll, and we can see that 63%, again, close to that 60% number, say the answer is 162. We have 12% that said 143, 11% that said 25, and 9% that said 443. So almost a 3-way tie for second place there. And in last place would be port 22 with only 4% of the vote. So if we went with the majority here, certainly would be port 162. 162 is an important number. It's one off of what we would commonly see when we were using something like simple network management protocol. It's like I missed the protocol piece right there at the top. I need to put that back in. This is one that is a protocol that gathers information reactively from devices. So you have a management station on your network. This management station occasionally will check in with a switch, with a router, with a firewall, and ask for a particular metric. For example, how many bytes have gone into a particular interface. And then that device will respond back with a number, a value, or information about what was requested. Well, that number 161 isn't on the list. But then again, that scenario I just gave you was not the question. The question asked, a company receives an alert message each time an interface shows an error. Well, that's not reactive, that's proactive. That's a device reaching out to you to be able to send that information. We refer to this as a trap. It's just an alert, just a fancy name for an alert that you would configure in this device. You configure this before this problem occurs, and you ask that device, if you ever see this particular problem, don't wait for me to ask about it. Just send me an alert straight on saying, oh, I just saw an error. Just thought you'd like to know. And that is a very important way that you can have immediate feedback from these devices when a problem happens to occur. Well, again, we refer to these as a simple network management protocol trap. It is an alert, and the port number that it uses is a UDP port, and it is port number 162. So 162 is the one that we were looking for. And indeed, that was the one that most of you chose. 162 is the number we wanted. 443 is obviously the protocol that we would use for encrypted web communication using HTTPS. 143 and 25 commonly associated with different email configurations. And 22 SSH is a very common one to find for secure shell. Obviously, in this case, it's a two-step process. We needed to decipher what is it they were asking about. And then obviously, we would need to know what port numbers associated with that particular function. And indeed, it was 162, and 63% of you got that one absolutely correct. Let's do another question, since we're doing questions today. This next one asks, a known attack exploit is blocked before it reaches the internal corporate network. Which of the following has most likely blocked this traffic? Is this a load balancer, a layer 3 switch, a VPN concentrator, an IPS, or a wireless LAN controller? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen and go to professormesser.com/QA. The question again asks, a known attack exploit is blocked before it reaches the internal corporate network. Which of the following has most likely blocked this traffic? Is it load balancer, layer 3 switch, VPN concentrator, IPS, or wireless LAN controller? Lock in your answer and see what this one happens to be. Maybe this is a function that you have put into your system and already into your network. Maybe you're running this. You can even run this technology at home. Am I giving too much of this away? I might be. But all of these, I guess you could technically run at home. Many of these I do run at home. So this is very common to find in a home environment in many weird cases like mine. Hopefully this is one that you're familiar with as well. This is important technology for anybody's network. It'd be great if we could block attack exploits before they reach our internal corporate network. So it might be useful to have this technology on your network. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asks, a known attack exploit is blocked before it reaches the internal corporate network. Which of the following has most likely blocked this traffic? Is it the load balancer, layer 3 switch, VPN concentrator, IPS, or wireless LAN controller? 72% of you say the answer is IPS. So a little bit more than we got on the last one, but we still have 12% that say it's a layer 3 switch that blocked that. 9% of you said the VPN concentrator blocked that one. And then 3% say wireless LAN controller and 1% say load balancer. I was looking for more than that 1% for load balancer, quite honestly. If you have a device that is looking for known vulnerabilities, it's looking for someone taking advantage of these known vulnerabilities by using an exploit over the network, then what you are finding is that you are using an intrusion prevention system, an IPS. An intrusion prevention system is looking for known types of attacks. Those are very easy to pick out and block. Some IPS will also look for types of attacks and that are very broad in the way that they are written. For example, some IPS are set up so that it will look for any type of SQL injection. It doesn't have to have a specific signature, which is kind of nice to have there. Many of today's modern intrusion prevention systems are no longer standalone units like we used to have back in the day. These days, this functionality is built into our next generation firewalls, and you're either enabling or disabling that feature within the firewall that you happen to be using. Most of these more popular next generation firewalls are extremely capable intrusion prevention systems, in some cases even surpassing the capabilities of our older standalone systems. And that is one that can really help block a lot of the standard noise that would normally be coming in. So before your firewall starts working, you can kind of get rid of everyone who's just running scripts and trying to attack your network, never even touches the main part of your firewall. That is an intrusion prevention system, or an IPS. 72% of you got that one right. Now, 12% say a layer 3 switch. Layer 3 switch, of course, is a device that forwards traffic based on a destination MAC address. That's the switch part. But you could also turn on routing functionality in that same device so that it could also route some of this traffic. That's effectively taken a separate router and separate switch and just stuck it into the same chassis. That layer 3 switch is very functional for forwarding traffic, but a layer 3 switch itself does not provide any security functionality. So that is not the answer that we would have. There are some layer 3 switches out there you might find that do have some security features, but it's not part of the layer 3 switch. It's just security features that are built into the layer 3 switch. For example, your layer 3 switch might have an IPS inside of it. It's not the switch that's blocking the traffic. It's the IPS that's blocking the traffic. VPN concentrators are great for connecting over a secure channel between two locations or between you and a corporate location, for example. That is something that is useful for making traffic difficult for others to see because you're encrypting everything. Nobody can see the type of traffic that you're sending over the network, which is great for protecting your traffic, but it doesn't block any traffic. It doesn't block known exploits, for example, so it would not be a VPN concentrator. Wireless LAN controllers are used to manage wireless access points, and load balancers are commonly used to distribute the load across multiple servers. Neither of those is designed to block exploits. The only answer here that made any sense is the one that 72% of you chose, and the answer is intrusion prevention system. That's exactly what we were looking for. Well done. Well, there is obviously a lot of information on the Network Plus exam. You've only seen a little bit of it so far, but if you were to look at my course, my N10-009 course is 87 videos, almost 13 hours of content. A lot of information in this course on networking, subnetting, network types, wireless networking, encryption. There's security technologies in here. There's so much, including the troubleshooting on top of all of that. One of the things I recommend, of course, is that you go through every video. But not everybody has time to do that. In some cases, you would like to have something afterwards that you could refer to that describes the information you got in those videos. Well, I have created that exact reference guide in my course notes. The course notes themselves are designed to summarize every video, give you all of the text from every video, give you all of the important charts from every video, all of the important graphics, all of the summaries of data. They're all in the course notes. If you wanted a single summary of everything, it's in the course notes. I have these course notes available for the N10-008 and the N10-009. You just saw the digital version. There are also physical versions. It's exactly the same content, of course, in the physical version. It's just printed out into a color book. It's what they call perfect bound, which is that softback binding. And it is set up so that you can have exactly the same information in a printed form that you would also get in the digital PDF form. If you decide to get the physical version, I will ship this to you. And while you're waiting on that to arrive, you will also get access to the digital version for free. So this is another place that you could go. If you're studying for the N10-008, there's obviously an N10-008 set of the course notes as well. Make sure you get the version that is appropriate for the exam that you're planning to take. Again, you have to make sure those match. You can find out more on our website. Go to professormesser.com/NPCN for more information. Let's do some more questions. Next question on our list is this one that asks, a tech has remotely power cycled a crashed server. Which of the following was most likely used to provide this functionality? Did the tech use UPS, switched power supply, generator, redundant power supplies, or PDU? A tech has remotely power cycled a crashed server. Which of the following was used to provide this functionality? Is it UPS, switched power supply, generator, redundant power supply, or PDU? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. A lot of people asking in the chat room so far, what are these differences between the 008 and 009? What are the detailed differences? Well, you could, of course, take the exam objectives for the 008, the exam objectives for the 009, and put them together. If you want to wait until the after show, which we do immediately after this, I'll put up a graphic. We can look at an overview of just what the differences are between the 008 and 009. So there are differences, and the differences are enough that you do not want to study from one if you're taking the other. So that's why I always tell people, make sure your study materials sync up with the exact version that you plan on taking, because it could make a difference on your exam. It could be the difference between passing and failing. That's how important that is. So make sure that you match those up and be able to work through those. Here, let's go through this question again. It asks, a tech has remotely power cycled a crashed server. Which of the following was used to provide this functionality? Is it a UPS, switched power supply, generator, redundant power supplies, or a PDU? Let's see what you chose. I'm very curious. We're a little torn on this one, aren't we? 38% of us say the answer is PDU. 24% say the answer is UPS. 20% say it is switched power supply. And 15% say redundant power supplies. So almost every answer in the double digits. The only one not in a double digit is the 1% that said generator. So this is a pretty good one. In fact, if you're managing a remote location, especially if that remote location is hours away from you, across the other side of the country, maybe in a different country entirely, it's not practical for you to be able to get up from your desk, walk over to it, hit the power button, or pull the power from the wall and plug it back in again. And in some of these environments, some of these locations, there's no one there to help you. And you never know if somebody who doesn't work with this equipment will be pulling the right cable or not. It's often nice to be able to have some automated way or some method that you could use to mechanically power down that particular interface and power it back up. And if you were planning to do that, you would use a power distribution unit, or a PDU. This is an example of a PDU. I just got a brand new PDU for a system that I run here in the studio. I need to take an updated picture of that. These are some of the older APCs that I use. That's my PDU right there. I took a picture of it. This is a device that sits in your rack. You see it's a rack mountable unit, and it has these ports on the front, power interfaces on the front. So you plug in these devices, and then from a front end, in this case, a web-based front end, you can control whether you want to turn that outlet on or turn that outlet off, all from this front end. So that allows you to turn off a system, turn it back on, and control any of the power settings for any of these devices, so that you don't have to get up from your desk. You don't have to fly to another city. You don't have to call and have somebody step through the process of what they're seeing, or put it on a FaceTime, or be able to understand, are you hitting the right thing? You can do it all yourself. And if there's any mistakes that happen, they're your mistakes. They're not someone else's mistakes. Not that we've ever made a mistake in powering off the wrong unit and causing a problem before. Okay, I have many, many times. So it's still on you, but in this case, you're the one who gets to control that. You can't blame someone else for pulling the wrong cable in your system, because you logged into your power distribution unit and you were able to control it from there. That was the answer we were looking for. And although we did not get a majority, a plurality of you did answer this one correctly. 38% of you chose a power distribution unit. Now, 24% of you said UPS, an uninterruptible power supply. And in your environment, you are probably using a UPS. I have UPS that I use here in the studio. You're probably using a UPS at your work or at home. It's a great system to be able to provide battery backup. But very rarely, if ever, does a UPS provide you with a way to manually or specifically power on or power off an individual interface on that UPS. That's not what they're built to do. They're built simply to provide you with battery backup. So this is not our best choice for this particular answer. In fact, PDU by far would be the choice that we would have in this case. A switched power supply. This name implies that we're switching something on and off. It seems to fit the answer here, but the switched in a switched power supply refers to its ability to either connect to a 120 or 110-120 type system, or a 220. So whenever you start getting into the different formats or different standards for power, whenever you're plugging in that connection, you need a power supply that can adjust itself either manually or automatically to provide the right type of power input. And we've referred to that functionality of being able to change between those 120, 240, or 220. You do that through a switched power supply. It is able to connect to either of those without any type of conversion, without anything extra that you would need to do. You simply plug it in and it works. That's the beauty of a switched power supply. It does not imply that individual interfaces will be switched on or switched off. It's really referring to the type of power input and switching between the two different standards. We have redundant power supplies, which are great if you happen to have a server and one of those power supply fails, because sometimes equipment fails. You can have the separate power supply that is able to keep that system running. That power supply is there just to provide power. It's not there to allow or disallow individual interfaces from being enabled or disabled. And it is not set up in a way that would allow you to control that from a different location. So a redundant power supply would not apply to this particular issue. And then a generator, and not many people chose this one. 1% of you chose generator. That is where you are providing constant power, usually for a larger group of systems. It also does not provide a way to power cycle an individual interface for a server that may have crashed. In this case, the best answer, the one that makes the perfect sense here and the one that fits the best, is indeed the one that 38% of you chose, a power distribution unit, or a PDU. Let's see another question. Since we're on a roll here, we're going to keep going with these questions and see how we do with the rest of these. The next one on our list is this one that asks, a network administrator is implementing 802.1x. Which of the following would be the result of this change? Would it be network access control, collision-free network connections, trunked VLANs between switches, aggregated Ethernet links, or loop-free switched networking? A network administrator is implementing 802.1x. Which of the following would be the result of this change? Would it be network access control, collision-free network connections, trunked VLANs between switches, aggregated Ethernet links, or loop-free network switching? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. That would be the way we do it. The PDU that I got, I should have brought the box in on the PDU that I got, is Ubiquiti PDU. They're sometimes hard to get your hands on. Now, a lot of the Ubiquiti equipment's difficult to get on the open market. It goes quick. You got to really, when it's there, you got to grab it. And I've got a different PDU that I'm swapping out that a service provider put in. I had a service provider put in a PDU. It's got a network connection. It's got everything you need. And I said, okay, what's the username and password for this PDU so that I can get into it and power cycle some of these things if I want? And the service provider says, oh, we don't give that out. No, this is for us to manage your network. And I said, well, I don't need you to manage my network. I need the username and password. They go, well, we can't give that out to you. I thought I bought that PDU. Oh, you did. You absolutely bought the PDU, but you did not buy the username and password. So I bought a PDU for myself so I can swap it out, and then it won't matter. Then I do know the username and password to get into the PDU. Kind of an odd thing, isn't it? Sometimes you run into those scenarios. It's not a scam. I knew this going in. We talked about it going in, but I told them that you can put in your PDU, but I'll be taking out your PDU. And they said, okay. They're fine. They're fine with that part, by the way. I think most of them are. Maybe a couple are not. But that's okay. It's my PDU now. And it's one that works really, really well. Let's see how you did with this question, though. Switching back over to this different technology that asks, a network administrator is implementing 802.1x. Which of the following would be the result of this change? Would it be network access control, collision-free network connections, trunked VLANs between switches, aggregated Ethernet links, or loop-free switched networking? What did you choose? 63% of you chose network access control. 19% of you said trunked VLANs between switches. We've got 7% that said collision-free network connections. 5% said aggregated Ethernet links, and 3% said loop-free switched networking. Now, in your mind, you should have gone through each of these and recognized what technology was being described. So if you can do that, you're in pretty good shape. But if you can't do that, we're about to do it for you, so you'll know what those answers are. 63% said network access control is 802.1x. And indeed, port-based network access control, or NAC, is indeed 802.1x. The X here is not a placeholder. That's the actual letter of the standard. It just happens to be 802.1x, a capital X if you wanted to be pedantic about it, and I do. It's not lowercase x, it's an uppercase x. There is a difference between lowercase and uppercase in the IEEE standards. It's subtle, but it's important. And in this case, it is an uppercase X, designating that it is a full standard unto itself. It's not part of a revision to an existing standard. Those are the differences when you're using those. Network-based access control requires that you authenticate before gaining access to the network. Normally on a network switch, you could just bring up a laptop, plug it in, and you're connected to the switch. But one of the ways that you can prevent somebody from gaining that level of access to your network, and that is a dangerous level of access, is to provide some type of authentication so that they must first authenticate, and only then can they gain access to the network. There's more concepts behind this. For example, the authentication that you use might designate what VLAN you would be put into. So sometimes the switch itself can even change the configuration of an interface based on who happens to be connecting to that switch. Anytime we start adding on more layers, we add more complexity. So not everybody uses that level of complexity with network-based access control, but network access control is an important security, and almost everybody's using some level of 802.1x on their network, because it is a very powerful security tool that can prevent someone from gaining access to the rest of the network. That is indeed network access control. And if you're implementing 802.1x, that's exactly what you are turning on inside of those switches. Now, we have other technologies here. Some of you that chose many of them, 19% of you, for example, chose trunked VLANs between switches. This, of course, allows us to put a single connection between two switches and send many different VLANs over that single connection. Allows us to have efficiency not only in the interfaces, but in the type of traffic that we're sending. That is a standard known as 802.1q. .1q, we often abbreviate that as. Oh, are you running .1q on that link? What somebody's really saying is, do you have a trunk connection between those two different switches? So it is 802.1, but it's not X, it's Q. So it's a different standard, an important one that you need to know, and make sure you know the difference between those two different standards. 7% of you said collision-free network connections. Well, that means we'd simply turned on full duplex on a particular switch connection. It's not an 802.1x or 802.1q. It's simply full duplex. It's part of 802.3, if you will, which is the Ethernet standard. So collision-free network connections, not what we were looking for. 5% of you said aggregated Ethernet links. We refer to that as link aggregation, literally LAG, L-A-G, and it commonly uses a control protocol known as LACP, the Link Aggregation Control Protocol. But in this particular case, we're talking about 802.1x, not LAG or LACP. So it would not be aggregated Ethernet links. And lastly, loop-free switch networking. We should all hope for loop-free switched networking. In fact, hopefully, if you have a switched network, you have enabled spanning tree protocol, or STP, which is also another standard, an 802.1 standard. In this case, 802.1 lowercase d, I think is the one. But there were updates to this that go past that version, because we have a rapid spanning tree protocol, for example, which is a different standard with a different setting. So it's not important that you know the IEEE standard settings for STP on your network, or for what you're doing with the Network Plus exam, but it's another nice thing to know about. In this case, STP does not provide any type of authentication or use network access control or have anything to do with 802.1x. In that case, the answer we were looking for, network access control, 63% of you chose that one. That is the right answer. That's the one we were looking for. If you are someone who is studying for your exam, maybe you've already passed your Network Plus exam, maybe you've passed your A Plus exam or your Security Plus, and you're using Continuing Education Unit credits or CEUs to be able to renew your certification, I would be glad to send you a 1-hour webinar category CEU just for watching this. In fact, you have to get an email from me verifying that you were here to be able to use this, whether you're watching live or watching on demand. One of the things that you can do to earn or to receive that email from me is you follow these instructions. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, put your name, put your email address. In the subject line, please put September 2024 Network Plus. And then in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, Network Access Control. Network Access Control are our super secret code words of the month. And simply send that to me. You can also put anything else you'd like into that message. I read through every single one of these. It takes me about a week or so to get these back to you. I've been very good lately at only working this through every couple of days. So we're getting them out a little faster lately, but I don't guarantee it will be that way. It takes me about a week, and then I'll send you an email that certifies that you are here to watch this. Also as a digital signature at the bottom so you know it really came from me and that nothing inside of that email was changed on its way to you. Again, the process is that you go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. You click Contact Us, put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, put September 2024 Network Plus. And in the body of the message on the line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, Network Access Control. And then you will earn a 1-hour webinar category Continuing Education Unit credit. Well, let's do some more questions. I've got more for you. This next question on our list asks, a network administrator is troubleshooting a link with excessive next. It sounds like I didn't write that properly, but I did. Which of the following would be the best way to troubleshoot this issue? Well, should I enable LACP, switch from multi-mode to single mode, configure STP, re-terminate the cable connections, or increase the MTU? A network administrator is troubleshooting a link with excessive next. Which of the following would be the best way to troubleshoot this issue? Should I enable LACP, switch from multi-mode to single mode, configure STP, re-terminate the cable connections, or increase the MTU? Do you think you know the answer? Follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. I'll have to see if you know how you would do this one. It should be a good one to sit through and figure out, because all of these can be done. All of these answers are part of the exam objectives, but only one of them helps solve this particular issue. So this is one where, again, we have to know a couple of things. We have to understand the situation that we're having, and then we have to understand how to troubleshoot that situation. So again, a multi-step process that CompTIA likes to use on the questions. This could be something very similar in style, similar in tone to an actual exam question. And they tend to be relatively succinct these days on the exam. There might be 2, sometimes 3 sentences. Very rarely these days are they going over that number. They've really tried to optimize the testing environment and get as much knowledge out of you with the least amount of text, it seems. They've really been working on that. I have no concept as to what they do behind the scenes to create these. All I see is the final result. And then I can analyze and pontificate on what I believe they have done to create that final result. But in reality, I have no idea what they've done. I just know that, hey, this question sounds a lot better than some of the older ones. So that style and tone is something that you should absolutely become familiar with. This question again asks, a network administrator is troubleshooting a link with excessive next. Which of the following would be the best way to troubleshoot this issue? Should we enable LACP, switch from multi-mode to single mode, configure STP, re-terminate the cable connections, or increase the MTU? Let's find out what you think the answer is. Ooh, we are all over the place with this one for sure. We have 27% that said re-terminate the cable connections, a three-way tie for second place with 19% for enable LACP, 19% for configure STP, and 19% for increase the MTU. 14% of you said switch from multi-mode to single mode. So this is a good example where none of these answers are single digits. We had a significant number of people put this in. And part of the problem with this question is it sounds like I didn't finish the sentence, because it says the network administrator's troubleshooting a link with excessive next. Excessive next what? No, it's next that we are troubleshooting. The excessive amount of near-end crosstalk. That's what that next stands for. Crosstalk is a significant physical level issue with your cabling. And if you have an excessive amount of near-end crosstalk, that means that you are measuring with some type of analysis tool, like the one you see on the screen here. We plugged in a connection, we're sending signal across that connection, and we are measuring how much of that signal is leaking out, is being received on a set of wires that's right next to where our wires are that we're sending out. And it's all at the near end, which means it's closest to us, which means the signal that we're sending out is the strongest that it's going to be. And so you're able to measure, if you send a signal out on pins 1 and 2, you can measure how much of that signal you're hearing on pins 7 and 8. And that will tell you that there is perhaps some issue in keeping that signal separated, especially at that strong signal that is at the near end. That's why it's such a valuable metric to examine, which is that near end crosstalk. Now, there are other metrics that we can examine. We could take the same measurements from the far end, which give us a different perspective. Far end crosstalk, probably not as popular a measurement, because near end crosstalk means we're getting it right there as it's coming out of the system. So it's a little bit more specific. And then alien crosstalk is interference from other cables that are around you that perhaps you're not sending information through. For the N10-009, it's also useful to know attenuation to crosstalk ratio, which is the difference between how much signal you're losing just by connecting to the network, call that insertion loss, and the near-end crosstalks, very often represented as an SNR, signal to noise ratio. So near-end crosstalk is what we were working with this question. And if we are troubleshooting a link with excessive near-end crosstalk, that's some problem with these wires being able to separate signal from one way to another. In a type of wiring that we use in all of our Ethernet networks is one that is twisted pair wiring. The reason that we twist those pairs, and it's not just a flat set of wires going across, is that the twist means that one of the wires is always moving away from the noise. And when we get that signal on the other end, we can look at those two wires to see what of the signal is now not associated with noise. And we're able to pull the noise out of all of those by doing this. Now, the way that we would maintain or have a limited amount of noise on that line is to keep those twists. But if you've ever seen a type of cable punch down, or you've worked with someone who's put on an RJ45 connector and they've never done it before, one of the things they will do is strip off the cable sheath, and then they will pull the cables apart, and they will have an inch of flat cable with no twist in it, and they'll put the connector on. Well, you've now lost all of those twists. You've now lost the ability to differentiate between what is noise and what is not noise. You want to keep that twist as much as you can before connecting it or before punching it down. So one of the ways that you can address near-end crosstalk is to be able to re-terminate those cable connections so that we can keep more of those twists in the cable itself. So absolutely become familiar with that. 27% of you chose re-terminate the cable connections, and that is what we were hoping to have in this particular case. Now, what about these other scenarios people chose? 19% of you said enable link aggregation control protocol. We talked about LACP with a previous question. The link aggregation control protocol is used to manage multiple connections between switches so that you can aggregate those links together. has nothing to do with near and crosstalk. So enabling LACP is not going to help you with any of your crosstalk issues. Configuring STP, we also talked about STP in a previous question. That's spanning tree protocol. That is the protocol that we would configure and enable on our switches to prevent loops on a switch network. And although loops are important for you to prevent on a switch network, has nothing to do with the physical signal that we are putting over that wire and the values that we're seeing for near and crosstalk. So configuring STP or not configuring STP has no effect on near and crosstalk. And then increasing the maximum transmission unit is very useful for optimizing the amount of traffic you're sending in a single frame, but it doesn't help you very much with handling near and crosstalk. It won't affect it at all. So near and crosstalk and MTU are not related to each other. Increasing the MTU or even decreasing the MTU has no effect on crosstalk values. And lastly, we have 14% of you that say switch from multi-mode to single mode. In this case, switching from one type of fiber to another type of fiber might help you with different things relating to optical fiber, but near and crosstalk is a copper value. This has nothing to do with fiber. In fact, you will not find crosstalk. If you have crosstalk on your fiber connection, you've now got bigger problems with physics. You've now messed up how things work in the world, or maybe you've discovered something new. But anytime you see near and crosstalk, we're talking about copper connections. So switching from multi-mode to single mode may be required for some other reason, but it would have nothing to do with near and crosstalk. In this case, the answer that we were looking for, the one that makes the most sense, the one that we were hoping to find, and the one that 27% of you chose was re-terminate the cable connections. That is exactly what we wanted to do. That would help you with your crosstalk values and help minimize how much of that interference is being seen across different wires. Well, everything that we've talked about today is all relating to topics that you can find in a document that you can download for free from CompTIA. This is the CompTIA exam objectives. These objectives will list for you everything you need to know to pass this exam. There are a set of bullets for every topic on this exam. Everything they will ask you comes from this document. So often people ask me, what do I really need to study? What things are going to pop up on the exam? What topics does CompTIA like to ask about? Well, they simply choose randomly from all of these topics and they ask you. Now, the difficult part of this, of course, is that there are a lot of topics. There are hundreds and hundreds of topics we need to know. Not very unusual for an industry certification exam. But another thing that's important about this is what they ask. So if you know all of the bullets that are in this document, you're going to pass your exam because you already know everything they could possibly ask. That's one of the great benefits of having the set of exam objectives. It's a free document. You can download it directly from CompTIA. You can go to my link, which jumps you over to the CompTIA site. That's at professormesser.com/objectives. Or you can go to your favorite search engine, type in CompTIA exam objectives. The first link is going to go to the exam objectives page. This is a fantastic utility to use. This is your checklist that you should be using before you start your studies. It's the last thing you should be referencing before you book your exam. It tells you immediately if you really are ready to walk into that exam room. Find out about it, professormesser.com/objectives. It's what I use to build all of my videos. That's one of the reasons I can tell you without any hesitation that everything in my video course matches exactly to this set of exam objectives. You have exactly the expectation that CompTIA has set, and I even follow the exact same numbering scheme that they do. It makes it very easy to find information in my video course. Find out more, go to professormesser.com/objectives and download that document. We do one of these Network Plus study groups every month. Our next study group is currently scheduled for October 16th. I say scheduled because sometimes we have to move those around. In fact, the one that we did today is one that was originally scheduled for tomorrow, but I had to move it up a day because of things. So when that happens, I always update the calendar immediately so that you know when those changes are happening. You can find that calendar at professormesser.com/calendar. We also have an events calendar in our Discord. So the Discord is also updated as soon as I update that calendar. They're all kept in sync so that you will always know when the next live event is going to be. You might be watching this video months from now, and you might be asking yourself, well, when is the next event going to be? Go to professormesser.com/calendar. It will tell you when the next event is going to be. Now, also this month, before we leave September, we have our Security Plus study group Wednesday of next week. So if you're studying for Security Plus, you might want to come back for that one. And of course, in October, on the 8th and the 10th is our A Plus study groups. As we mentioned, the 16th is Network Plus, and October 23rd will be the second next Security Plus study group after the one we do next week. Well, we've come to the end of our first hour, but we're now done with Q&A. Although I've finished the questions I'm going to be asking of you, there are plenty of questions you might want to ask of me. And one of the ways you can do that is to use professormesser.com/QA. And there's a link at the top, a little tab. You can switch over and submit questions for me that we will talk about right after this in our after show. Don't forget about our Network Plus Success Bundle out on our website at professormesser.com/netsuccess. We also have our discounted vouchers. You could pay full price at the CompTIA website, but why would you do that when I have discounted vouchers available at professormesser.com/vouchers? And of course, we have our Discord, our YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to that at professormesser.com/YouTube. Our Twitter connections and Instagram for our weekly Network Plus pop quiz. And of course, you may just want to type in the name of a social media site just to see if I'm there. Go to professormesser.com/ the name of whatever that site happens to be. It's a great way to find us and to support us on our social media sites. Well, hopefully that's given you some things to think about today. Stick around for our after show. Thank you so much for joining us in this first hour, and we will see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Okay. Let's now switch over to the after show portion of the study group. This is the part of the study group where I ask you questions. Actually, you ask me questions, I answer the questions. I'm so tuned in to asking you questions during this first hour. The way that you can contribute is to simply go out to the professormesser.com/QA link. If you do that, there will be a message on the screen that says you can submit questions for the second hour of the study group at any time. We will be moderating questions during the session, so your contribution will not appear immediately. I put a may in there because it sounded nicer, but the reality is you won't see anything pop up on the screen until I put the things up on the screen. So a number of you have already submitted some questions. I will be sifting through these and going through the list of those. In the meantime, though, there was a question that was asked earlier about differences between the current version, the N10-008 version of the exam, and the current N10-009 version. I guess they're both current. It's just one is the 008 and one's the 009. Now, I created a document that summarizes this difference. Here it is. There you go. So, you got to have a chart like this to be able to really visualize the differences between these different exam versions. The N10-008 is the large circle on the left. The N10-009 is the somewhat smaller circle on the right. The size of the circle correlates back to the total number of objectives that are in the exam objectives. So if we pop back over to those objectives really quick, if I go through this entire list and I count the objectives. So for instance, in section 1, explain concepts related to the open systems interconnection OSI reference model, we have layer 1 physical, layer 2 data link, layer 3 network, et cetera, et cetera. So those are 7 of those objectives. That's how I count these. Next, on the section 1.2, compare and contrast network appliances, applications, and functions, physical and virtual appliances, which is router, switch, firewall, IDS, IPS, load balancer, proxy, and NAS. So just this first column is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of those different ones. So I count up how many of these bullets are in a particular section of the exam objectives. I count them all up. And after doing that, I come up with the total number of objectives. And in this case, the total number for the N10-008 is somewhere around 590. The total number in the N10-009 is somewhere around 430. That's a big difference in total number of objectives. And you'll notice that I even summarized it as the N10-009 contains 27% fewer objectives than the N10-008. I hate dealing with percentages because it really doesn't tell the story directly, kind of gives you a broader view. The real numbers are 590 versus 430, which is a pretty significant number. You know, it's over 100 objectives, 160, 100. Yeah, it's a lot of objectives that you would not need to study if you're taking the N10-009. So if you're purely looking at total number of things I need to know, the N10-009 certainly has fewer of those total number of things that you need to know. Now, I also mentioned to you that when you move from one version of the exam to another, that the number is different, but also the objectives themselves are different. And so what I've summarized here is on the N10-008, 300 of the objectives on the N10-008 are exclusive to the 008. That means CompTIA effectively dropped 50% of the objectives when they moved to the 009. About half of the exam just got thrown out, completely gone. This is why I tell you, never study from N10-008 books if you're planning to take the N10-009 because you're studying the wrong thing. That's why I'm so, I say this over and over and over, and I'm very, very serious about that particular topic. Always study from materials that match the version of the exam that you're going to take. It's a mantra of mine. Make sure you do that. There are a number of objectives that are the same. So if you have been studying for the N10-008, about 67% of the N10-009 objectives come from the same ones that were on the 008. So a nice about 2/3 of the 009 would be things that you already know about. But again, 1/3 of the exam is different. 1/3 of the exam are a set of objectives that are new in the 009. So that's why I tell people, make sure that you study from the right materials. Now, is one more difficult than the other? I would say that the topics overall, the style of questions and the items that you would be studying have effectively the same difficulty level between both of these. I guess you could make an argument that studying for 430 objectives is a bit easier than studying 590 objectives. I guess that's a pretty good argument, actually. But those are pretty close to each other in the big scheme of things. But there are differences. So you could argue that the N10-009 might be a little bit easier to study for, but I would argue also that the topics themselves, it's just as hard on the 009 as it was on the 008. The difficulty level is effectively the same. So that is one that you'll have to decide for yourself which one is going to be the best fit for you. In fact, if you've been studying for the last 6 months for the N10-008, keep studying that one. There's not such a big difference between those two that you would ever want to switch in midstream. And you have until December until the N10-008 is retired. But if you're starting your studies right now, why would you limit yourself to a December retirement date? Just grab N10-009 study materials and study for that version of the exam. Now, by the way, once you get to December the 20th, on the December 21st, the 008 is gone. So this is really a conversation we can have for the next few months. But after that point, it won't matter anymore anyway, because the N10-008 will be gone. We never have to worry about that again. And hopefully that gives you some perspective. Now, I didn't go through here's what's new and here's what isn't. I make a spreadsheet for every exam version, every topic. I have a complete outline. I cross-reference everything. I know exactly what was removed. I know exactly what was added. I have plenty that's there. So one of the things that I really focus on is trying to give you the best perspective. But if you really want to dive into it, go grab both sets of objectives. You can go through it yourself and get a feel for yourself which one might be better for you over a different one. So just another thing that might help you on your studies. Maybe that'll give you a better idea what direction you want to lean, whether you really want to keep going with the N10-008 or whether the N10-009 might be a good one to start with. Let's now jump into the questions you have for me. If you would like to ask questions, you can submit them at any time using the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA, and I'm going to go through all of these and kind of break these down. Let's start with a question from Anonymous. Anonymous asks, I'm studying the N10-008 presently. Great. But what should I study extra from the 008 and 009 version? Well, if you're studying for the N10-008 exam, you can completely ignore the 009. I think we've now taken that topic and described why it's important you only study from N10-008 if you're taking the N10-008 exam. So if you're studying for the N10-008, just pretend the N10-009 doesn't exist. La, la, la. Can't see the N10-009. It's not here. Nope. No N10-009. We're only studying for the 8. If you're studying for the 9, pretend the 8 doesn't exist. So always only study from one set of materials that match what your exam might be or will be. The other question you have here is, can I use my voucher for the 009 exam if I can take the 009 exam after the December 20th 008 retirement? This is December 2024 008 retirement. One thing that is nice about vouchers from CompTIA is they're not tied to a specific exam version. So when you buy a Network Plus voucher, that Network Plus voucher is good for a year. You can use that voucher for whatever Network Plus exam might be available during that year period. So if we are currently in this transition period between 8 and 9, and you can choose either one of those, you can use that voucher and apply it to the 008, or you can use that voucher and apply it to the 009. It does not matter. Now, if you look in the CompTIA store, they actually show the voucher as a 008 voucher, and they also show a voucher as a 009 voucher. They show it as two separate vouchers. Here's the secret. It's the same voucher. It is. They don't tell you that part, but it's exactly the same voucher. And if you were to buy vouchers from my site for Network Plus, and you get that discounted voucher from me, I probably bought it as an N10-008 voucher or a 009 voucher on my side. But when I give it to you, it's just good for Network Plus. Doesn't matter which one you use, which makes it easy when I have to deal with this during this transition period. Could you imagine the challenges if some people bought a 008 voucher and some people bought a 009 and they changed their minds and there would have to be some type of switch? Just the customer service alone would require us to rethink that idea. So fortunately, CompTIA has already thought about that. So doesn't matter what voucher you have, you just use whatever voucher you got, and you can use and apply that towards any available Network Plus exam. So if you went to the CompTIA website right now and you bought a 008 voucher, it's good for a year, which means it would be good until September of 2025. But then you aren't able to take the exam until February. And you may be thinking, oh, I bought this N10-008 voucher. It's not good anymore. No, it's still good till September. You can still use that for the latest exam. So don't think that your voucher is no longer good and then you go out and have to buy another voucher. Save your money. That's something that's important as well. So again, make sure that you have a voucher, but then you can use that voucher for whatever exam is available out there on the internet. Let's keep going with questions that you might have. Other things that are on this list. A lot of questions coming in. Thank you for sending in your questions. So there were a number of questions that came in. We were talking earlier about performance-based questions. In fact, we did a performance-based question today that had DNS type scenarios and then the type of DNS record that would be associated with that particular scenario. And you could have gotten some of them right and some of them wrong because we had 7 different record types and only 4 different scenarios. You could have gotten 1 right. You could have gotten 2 right. You could have gotten 3, or you might have gotten all 4 of them right. So the question that Sean asks is, are performance-based questions on the exam graded with any partial credit, or is it all or nothing? Well, CompTIA has actually addressed this, and let's look to see what they happen to say. I'm going to Google up CompTIA performance-based question FAQ. And in fact, the first link is a link to the CompTIA website where they have performance-based question, frequently asked questions from the Department of Redundancy department. We have, if you scroll to the bottom, the last question in their frequently asked question is partial credit given if I answer part of a performance-based question correctly? Sounds familiar, Sean. The answer is, they've cleared it up for us. They have said there may be questions for which partial credit is offered. However, exam questions and their scoring are confidential, so no further information can be provided regarding what questions may offer partial credit. They missed the B. I stuck the B in there. There may questions for which partial credit is offered. So there may be questions for which partial credit is not offered. So they've told us very clearly that there might be partial credit or there might not be partial credit. There you go. You've now taken care of partial credit and performance-based questions on this exam. The answer is that they don't tell you that, well, at least they said it could be. And I would like to think that if the performance-based question is structured in a way that would allow us to receive partial credit, I would like to believe that we do. But we don't. We don't know that for sure. And CompTIA does not tell you how they grade the exam. They will never tell you how they grade the exam. You will never know how your exam was graded. So ultimately, it really doesn't matter because you will never, in the list of questions we get, you will never know whether you got partial credit or whether you did not get partial credit. You just have no idea. The performance-based question, frequently asked questions, don't give us that perspective. So this is one of those scenarios where we just sort of have to do our best on the exam. Don't worry so much about how they grade things because we have no control over that. Just do the best you can, and the grade is going to work itself out at the end anyway. So that's what I would recommend is you work through that process, especially if you're trying to reverse engineer. I get emails all the time from folks that are trying to reverse engineer the grade that they received, or it's a percentage, or maybe they think that they can figure out how many total questions you need to get right to pass the exam. But the reality is, well, there's no way to know, and there's no way to know for sure. And we can, of course, have an argument about it and talk about it and try to drill down and maybe try to reverse engineer or come up with something. But at the end of that conversation, none of us really know what the answer is, and we never will know. So there's no way to prove or disprove either way. Some people say performance-based questions are clearly worth more than the multiple choice questions. I don't know why they think that, but very clearly we have no idea. So why would we very clearly think that? In fact, I think there's a pretty good argument that the performance-based questions might be worth less than multiple choice questions. Certainly overall in the total exam. One of the things that we can, the only thing we can really do is listen to stories of people who've taken the exam. And we have had individuals come to our site, and I have no reason to think that they were saying something that wasn't true, but they said, I skipped over the performance-based questions at the beginning. I did all of the multiple choice questions. And just as I was going back to start the very first performance-based question, I ran out of time. The exam ended. It took me to the end screen and said, your exam time is up. It's over. Fill out these types of questions we have for demographics. He did that and then said, I'm finished. And it said, well, you passed. So even in that scenario, he didn't do any of the performance-based questions. And for his particular exam and the way that he answered his multiple choice-based questions, he still passed. So it can be done in certain scenarios, but we think that everybody's test is different. We think they are all graded different. Each question is worth a different number of points. Everybody's test is going to be a little bit different than everybody else's. So we don't know. We just aren't sure with any of that, but we do know that they're worth some points. So you should strive to do as the best you can with all of these. Ultimately, that's all we can really ask. Just do the best you can. The final number is going to work out to be whatever the final number happens to be. Let's do some more questions that you've sent in. If you'd like to submit a question, you can do that by following the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can lock that in. Here's a good question, one that I get a lot. Asks, what do you suggest as the best way to study/memorize all of these acronyms we have to know? Well, I'm going to start by not accepting the premise of the question. If you're answering questions, that's a great way to start, isn't it? By just ignoring what someone has said. It's not what I'm trying to do. But I do want to properly position the importance of acronyms. So let's talk about acronyms. If you go back to the exam objectives, I've been talking about this quite a bit lately. So let's look at the N10-009 exam objectives. This is the official document from CompTIA. Tells you about the exam, gives you information about exam development, the CompTIA authorized material use policy. So if you're ever wondering if you're studying from the right type of information and what's expected of you on the exam, they give you that information. They also say, here's the exam itself, how long it is, a lot of the information we've already talked about, and then the distribution of questions that you could expect to receive on your exam based on the different domains that are contained within these exam objectives. So if we were to look at Section 1, Section 2, Section 3, Section 4, there's a lot of topics we need to know. But back behind all of these sections is the CompTIA Network Plus N10-009 acronym list. And they give you two pages of acronyms. Not too bad for the Network Plus. These are all the acronyms that they list out at the end of this. My perspective of this, my recommendation for acronyms is that you completely ignore these 2 pages in a broad sense. Because what I think should be happening is as you are going through Section 1, Domain 2, Domain 3, Domain 4, and Domain 5, you should already be going through these acronyms organically. They should already be popping up. In fact, let's look real quick. We'll start with the very first section in the very first domain, Section 1.1, which is explain concepts related to the Open Systems Interconnection, OSI, reference model. So we've already got one acronym right there, OSI, Open Systems Interconnection. The important part about OSI and Open Systems Interconnection is not that those are the words associated with those letters. Although, of course, that's important, but by itself, knowing that OSI means Open Systems Interconnection doesn't actually tell me what OSI is. In fact, it probably tells me nothing about what OSI is and how important it is to what we do on a day-to-day basis with networking. In fact, the words Open Systems Interconnection don't even really properly describe the Open Systems Interconnection model, which is really what we're talking about. So my first recommendation to you is not to focus too much on simply knowing the acronym name and the letters and the acronym name, sort of the flashcard representation of these terms, because you will already learn what these things are as you go through this. In fact, we'll go to Section 1.2. Look at all these acronyms. Intrusion Detection System, IDS. Intrusion Prevention System, IPS. Network Attached Storage, NAS. Storage Area Network, SAN. Access Point, AP. Content Delivery Network, CDN. Virtual Private Network, VPN. Quality of Service, QoS. Time to Live, TTL. So in this one section is 9 different acronyms we need to know. And they're in the exam objectives. So as you go through your videos, your books, your Q&A, your hands-on, while you're learning these topics that are associated with Section 1.2 of the exam objectives that compare and contrast networking appliances, applications, and functions, you've already learned about acronyms like IPS, CDN, VPN, TTL, QoS. And more importantly, not only do you know that time to live and TTL are the same thing, you know what time to live is. You know how it's applied in the world of protocols and why we would need time to live as part of the protocols that we use. how these acronyms apply to networking, how we use these technologies on our networks, how we would use and take advantage of these is much more important than simply understanding these letters are represented by these words. So if you're going to make flashcards, and some people like to do flashcards for the acronyms, maybe they go back to the acronym list and they go to one of these like NAS, Network Attached Storage. There it is, right there in the list of acronyms. So that NAS is there, but I think if you're going to do a flashcard, don't just have NAS on one side and Network Attached Storage on the other. You should, in fact, have maybe NAS on one side, Network Attached Storage, and an explanation of what it is on the other side, or some comparison of those. Maybe that's 3 separate values and we create a number of different cards for those. So don't focus solely on letters and words. And I will tell you, you will never get a question on your exam that says, what do the letters NAS stand for? You'll never see a question like that. First, way too easy. That's a gimme. But secondly, it doesn't help. Doesn't tell you anything about what the technology is. Oh, that stands for Network Attached Storage. Well, big deal. What is that? So always take it to the level of how is that technology used? Why is that technology important? In what way would that technology be deployed on our network? That's the way you use acronyms for this exam. And quite honestly, all the acronyms you're going to need are going to be learned organically by going through the exam objectives. And that's why I tell people, don't worry so much about these in the back. What you'll find is all of the ones that you need to know from this list, you've already learned them. They were already part of your studies. They're already in your book. They're already in the video. They're already in the exam objectives earlier. This is more of just a summary of those all put in one place. So focus on the objectives, not so much on the list of acronyms, and I think you'll be fine. That's my recommendation anyway, and I think that would also help you avoid some of the many different acronyms and just spending way too much time on studying acronyms rather than studying what those technologies do, because ultimately that's what's going to help you on your exam. More questions. Let's keep going through this list. Some folks were asking earlier about the study group videos. Are they available on my YouTube channel? Yes, they are. This is the very first video of the N10-009 study groups. So currently on my channel, there is not a playlist for this set of videos. This is the very first one of that playlist. And so going forward, there will be more of these. You could, of course, study the N10-008 videos, which of course are available if you're studying for that version of the exam. So a little bit of a disclaimer there. Make sure you study the right ones for what we are doing. The N10-009 was only recently introduced, which is why this is our first N10-009 video. But as soon as I stop this video, I hit the stop button on YouTube, it is automatically saved to my YouTube channel. So I don't even have to do anything on the side. I just stop the video and it automatically takes a minute or two and then puts it onto my channel. I don't even have to do anything. So it's kind of nice to have that. Let's do some more questions. This is one more about what you do first and what you do second. This is from Joe, who asks, is it possible to sit for the N10-008 Network Plus exam before you sit for the CompTIA A Plus exam? Well, CompTIA does not have formal prerequisites for their exams. So you can take any exam at any time in any order. Doesn't matter to them. Do whatever makes sense for you. If I look at when I took my first CompTIA exams, the first CompTIA exam I took from CompTIA is the Security Plus. That's what I started with. Then I took the Network Plus. That's the second one I took. And then the last ones I took were the A Plus exams. So I did mine really backwards to what CompTIA recommends. CompTIA recommends you take A Plus first, then Network Plus, then Security Plus. I didn't do that. I did it the other direction, primarily because at that point in my career, I was working for a security technology company. I was working for Network Associates. We had firewalls and encryption. We had proxying technologies. We had antivirus and anti-malware. There was all kinds of interesting security technologies we were using. And if they said you need to do something to build on that as part of your annual goals and objectives, I said, well, why don't I get a security certification? They said, great. Which one do you want to get? I go, let's go get Security Plus. It's got security in the name. And they said, great, go get that. So it didn't make sense for me to get an A+. It didn't make sense for me to get a Network Plus. I went and got the Security Plus because that's what I needed for my particular career at that time. And CompTIA doesn't care. They don't set a prerequisite. They don't require you to have A+ or Network Plus, which was great. I just went and took the Security Plus and I was done. So if that makes sense for your personal goals and objectives, that you take Network Plus before you take A+, that's a perfectly reasonable thing for you to do. And I highly recommend you do that. And they won't care either. They will be glad to have you sit down and take the Network Plus and then later on sit down and take the A+. Completely up to you and what you're doing with it. Let's do some more questions. We have some more time, so let's do some more questions on this list. Again, if you'd like to submit a question, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and submit a question. This is one more about style rather than substance. Nick asks, how long should one study for the N10-009 exam if they don't have a tech background? I think a lot of people step into these exams without a tech background because they are entry-level certifications. That's what these certifications are designed for. Someone who's not been working so much in this particular field. It's to give you a broad overview of these technologies, in some cases a more detailed overview of these technologies. But the question specific to time, and this is an important question. It's a question a lot of people have. They want to be able to figure out, how long is this going to take me? And all I can really do is talk in some broad observations of what I have seen. Because everybody has a different background in technology. Everybody learns at a different pace. Everybody has a different style of learning that they like to follow. And some of those styles take a little longer than others. But very broadly, as a very broad overview, it tends to take somewhere around 2 to 3 months on average for someone to complete their studies and be ready to take the Network Plus exam. So if you have no tech background, you're starting at 0 and you're working your way up, you can fit it somewhere in the 2 to 3 month time frame. That tends to be the average. Now, obviously, that will depend on how much time do you have to study during the day. Are you only able to study on the weekends? Do you have different materials that you're using? Do you study from a book? Do you study from videos? Every one of those things adds and changes how much time. And some people like to really get into the material. I like to dive into the material and just really understand it. So it might take me more than 3 months if I was starting from ground zero. It might take me 4, 5, or 6 months to study this material. It also depends on how motivated you are and how much time you have. And if there's a deadline, often deadlines, they make us go a little bit faster. So it can push us a little bit more down that road. So I think if you're planning from ground zero, I think no tech background at all, starting from nothing, I think 2 to 3 months is a pretty good estimate. You may be able to go a little faster. It might take you a little longer. It would just depend. But I think that's a pretty good number to work from. Other questions. Let's keep going through this list. For those of us that have been in this industry a while, we empathize with Nick's question that asks, how do you calculate subnets in your head? How is this even possible? How are people able to do this? Because it seems almost insurmountable. First, it's math. That's a problem. Secondly, it's math. Again, a little bit of an issue. And thirdly, there's some calculations involved. So when you're talking about subnets, obviously a lot of us can do calculations in our head when the subnetting is at an 8-bit value. So if it's 255.255.0.0, we can do that one. If it's 255.255.255.0, we can do that one. but it's when you get into the /26s, the /27s, the /28s, starts to get a little bit more difficult in the math. And how a lot of us let me tell you how us in the industry do it, because I have been working in the industry as a systems engineer. I did for a very long time. And we had, every time I would walk into a customer, they would have a different IP addressing scheme. And I would see 3 to 4 customers a day. So when we would walk into the room, they go, well, here's our network. It's a 10.1.7.0/26. Okay. Well, then I would have to figure out, okay, if that's what you got, here's what we might design out. We'll whiteboard this thing, and here's the numbers we would use. Set the IP address for the firewall to this, and then we'll set the IP address for the VPN concentrator to this, and they had to be right based on their IP addressing scheme. The way that we did this in the industry was a very complicated process. We used a calculator. So we would, if it was a subnetting method that we were not familiar with, we would always double check our numbers. And in fact, I got to a point in these meetings like, you're the second customer I've seen today, so double check my numbers. Is this right? If we put this as the IP address of the firewall, I think that's correct on that subnet. And if we put the IP address of the VPN concentrator here, I think that's right for that subnet. They go, no, I have one's a /26. Oh, okay. Yeah. /26. So we'll make that a .7. So you need to be willing to get this wrong, because we all get IP addressing wrong. Everybody in this industry fights with subnetting. We all have challenges with math, and we all have a lot of numbers that we're dealing with the IP address of the device, the subnet mask of the device. You've got the CIDR block notation, and then you got to do the calculation. We're all trying to figure this out in your head. So don't be concerned that you're having to pull out a calculator or ask other people for validation, because they're having to do that too. Okay. The one thing that you will start to see is once you start working on a network for an extended period of time that uses a particular IP addressing scheme, a particular subnet mask, those subnet masks will start to become very normal for you. I worked on a network very early in my career that was a /26. And I can subnet a /26 network in my sleep, no problem. I got it because I did hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of designs and configurations and network setups and network diagrams and documentation and configurations, all of a /26. So I can do a 255.255.255.192 all day, every day. No problem, because I worked with it for years. So there are some subnets you will become very comfortable with, even the ones that are into those blocks. They become a little bit easier. And in that case, I don't need a calculator. I got it. I know where the differentiations are. I know where the subnets end. I know where the next subnet begins. I know what the network IDs are. I know what the broadcast IDs are. They're already in my head, because I'm very, very comfortable with that particular subnet. And I imagine on a lot of networks, people will run into that all the time. It's not a problem. So that's a really good example of where calculators won't need to be used, just because it's something you're very familiar with. But don't be afraid in the world of working with subnets of getting these things wrong. We get these things wrong all the time. I have been handed IP addresses. I was responsible for setting up demonstration units of firewalls, and I needed to plug in our management IP address. This is the IP address that we will use on the rest of our network to connect to the web-based front end of this firewall. And I'll say, I'll need an IP address, subnet mask, a default gateway. It's what you need by default, right? So they would give me an IP address, subnet mask, default gateway. They give it to me on a piece of paper. They write it down. Here you go. Use this one. And I would have to look at that piece of paper, and sometimes, not often, but sometimes they would give me an IP address and a subnet mask, but they would give me a default gateway that was not on that subnet. And I have to look at it. Sometimes I'd even type it in, and it's giving me an error, and I'm really, oh, wait a second. The subnet mask, the IP address, the default gateway is not even on the subnet. That's not going to work. And I have to get back with them and go, hey, the default gateway you gave me is on a different subnet. And they go, oh yeah, sorry. I do that all the time. It's a .7. Okay. Yep. Got it. Now we're on the right subnet. So this happens all the time. This is one of the things that we often don't realize in this industry is that there's a lot of technology. None of us in this world know all of the technologies. We all like to pretend we know. We all like to tell other people we know. And in fact, we might know a lot of technology, but we don't know all the technology. So whenever somebody is working in networking, working with security, working with operating systems, doing anything in IT, we know a lot about certain topics, but there will be other topics we know very little, if anything, about. And that's why we always like to have people in our group, in our teams, or nearby that we could pull in. Oh, you're having a BGP issue? You got to talk to that guy because he's the BGP expert. Oh, you're having a problem with spanning tree? Go talk to that person because they set up spanning tree. They know all about it. Oh, you're having a question about a /26 subnet? I'm the person you should talk to. So you often will run into different technologies that you become very good at. You become that topical expert, the subject matter expert, the SME in that particular topic. But you should never stop. If somebody is very knowledgeable about BGP and you are not, you should go hang out with them a little bit and get some of that BGP knowledge to rub off a little bit and get in your brain some. And a person who's very good at spanning tree, especially if you know nothing about it, the technologies you know nothing about are the scariest technologies in the world. The technologies where you have never worked with that technology in your life are the technologies that are absolutely insurmountable. And how are you ever going to learn about spanning tree? How is it ever going to be something that you are going to grasp? I know nothing about it, and it seems like the scary monster that I will never, never be able. Oh, it's that easy? Oh, you just turn that up. Oh, and then it just talks back and forth, and then it sends those BPDUs. Well, that wasn't so bad. So once you spend time learning it, you suddenly realize that scary monster that you thought was an insurmountable technology that you will never learn anything about, turns out it wasn't so hard at all. That's not the case with OSPF and BGP, but everything else is pretty much that way. The others, you do have to spend a lot of time grinding it down a little bit and learning a little bit as you go. But if you spend the time with the technology, get somebody knowledgeable to spend some time with you, stepping you through the details, grab a packet capture here, read a book about it there, go through the standard here. Once you really get into it and you read the manual, so to speak, you suddenly realize that's not as hard as I thought it was. I mean, it's difficult technology. Of course, it's hard to know because technology in general is a challenge, but it's not as hard as you thought it was going to be. It's certainly something that you can easily learn. And I think it's pretty much that way with any technology. Even today, if somebody comes up to me and says, oh, here's a new technology. Oh, let's dive into this. How's this going to go? Is this going to be another BGP? It's not. It'll be something pretty easy for you to learn. So make sure you sit through those and become familiar with them too. And I think the more you get into the process of wanting to learn what you don't know about, things do start becoming less scary, which is good. The other thing that I think we need to be better about in our industry, and sort of the secret I found in my career, at least the last 10 or 15 years of my career, is I was happy and not afraid to tell people when I did not know something. That was a pretty big thing because earlier in your career, you don't like to tell people you don't know. You're trying to prove yourself. You're trying to do this. And in fact, other technologists will sometimes taunt you and make fun of the fact that you don't know something. It's human nature, the way some people are just awful that way. And so we try to keep it ourselves, or we try to fake it till we make it, or we don't let people know that we don't know what they were just telling us. And we'll just go back and try to figure it out on our own. But at some point in your career, and I would recommend you do this sooner rather than later, you should turn into the person who is happy to ask questions and say, hold on a second. I have no idea what you just told me. I heard you say letters and words and things, but I'm not quite sure what it meant. What were you talking about when you said, I need to change the root ID of the STP ID of the root bridge? What did you mean by that? Just have somebody explain it. Can you whiteboard it? Can you go through it again? Let me grasp it, because all you need is someone to walk it through. Oh, no problem. We need to figure out what the root bridge is in our network. In our network, the root bridge is here because it's sort of at the top of the list and all the other bridges are down further in our topology chart. So we're calling that one, we've decided that's our root bridge up there. But to confirm that it's always going to be the root bridge, we need to make sure that the bridge ID of that bridge in spanning tree is set to the lowest possible number. So the default for other bridges is 32,768. We're going to set that bridge to 4096. That's what we're doing. And that way, all the other bridges will know that that's the root. All you had to do was somebody explain it in 60 seconds, and something that was a very difficult, challenging thing to track. Now that makes sense. Now that they've applied how you use that technology and how you would configure it and where you would configure it and why you would configure it, well, that makes perfect sense. So that's why I tell people all the time, be the person that asks, I don't know. Be the person in the training room that's on the front row so that you can really see and really hear and not worry about other people. They're going to look at you anyway because you're on the front row. They have to, because everybody's facing forward because of physics. But you're the one who goes, hold on, what you just said there in that section and you wrote that thing out, or the thing that's on the slide, I'm not seeing how those two things come together. Can you explain that for me? And they go, oh, no problem. Here, this is here and this is here. Let's do a little bit of this. Let me show you in a demo. Let me bring up a screen. See how these things, oh, got it now. Okay, great. Thanks. Got it. Thank you. Continue. At the end of those sessions, without fail, someone would come up to me after we've been sitting in that room an hour and a half. We're walking out. They'll say, I'm so glad you asked the question about the thing because I wasn't really following them. They'll tell you. At least you were in the room asking the questions. They didn't want to ask. They didn't want to seem like they were stupid. I got no problem people thinking I'm stupid. There's no issue with that. That's my normal default is that. But if you are asking the questions, you're the one who's learning. If you're the one wanting to really understand, you're the one that's getting it. And that is why you tend to get more knowledgeable the more questions you ask. So that is the issue. Now, if somebody does explain it again and you're still not getting it, that's when you go, nope, I'm not getting it. It's probably something stupid I'm not getting. We'll go through it after we're done here. And you can take that offline, as they say. You can circle back on that one. You can table that discussion and figure out the details. So that's why I tell you all the time, don't be afraid to be the one asking the questions. Don't be afraid to be the one who's trying to figure it out or worried that other people are going to see you as stupid. Who cares what they think? You figured it out. You're the smarter one now. You are the one who knows the difference. Let's get some more questions, more that are in here. Here's a good question and a timely question from Anonymous, who asks, hey, is there going to be a transcript written for the N10-009 like it was for the N10-008? For those of you not familiar with this, let me see if I can bring up a view of this on my site. If we were going to go to our Network Plus videos for the N10-008 on our website, I'm just going to choose a video at random. We'll look at data communication. The data communication video for the N10-008. I have a summary of this. It tells you, here's the video before that, the video after it. Here's the video itself. You can watch as an embed. And then there's a transcript underneath. That is a transcript that was written by humans, an important consideration. And it is also a transcript that is added to the YouTube video as a closed caption. So the entire text of everything I say in this video is here. Now, this is a very, very accurate transcript because the people that are doing the transcripts are literally watching the video as I'm going through it. So they can see the text that I have on the slide. And there's this very particular service I use of human beings that do this. I don't use the Google default closed captions. They are not great. They're okay, but for technical topics like this, they are not the most accurate. And I want to have the best possible representation of what I said on here as part of the transcripts. Now, the reason for that, there are a couple of reasons. I think it's important that everybody have access to this information. And I think having this in a text-based form certainly helps people who are watching these videos and English may not be their first language, but having closed captioning and transcripts that are high quality will help with that learning process. They've got an extra stumbling block. Let's try to make that process as easy as possible by having well-written, properly spelled, high-quality transcripts and closed captions. But I also have people in my family that have hearing difficulty, have hearing problems, that having their televisions are always on closed caption. They have to have that. They are deaf. They cannot hear anything. And so closed captions, accessibility, transcripts, and those types of things are very important to us, not just from it's important that people can learn, but it's personally important to me that we are able to do that. So it costs thousands of dollars to create these transcripts. Plainly, that's the numbers that it costs for every course. We're spending thousands of dollars to create those, but I could not imagine not having them. We should always have those transcripts. So yes, I have already submitted. I always create the videos first, then I submit those to the transcript team to be able to create the closed captions. They are working on them. And one of the things you'll notice with a number of the YouTube videos that are out there now for the 009, you'll notice that a few of them already have the extra human built transcripts in there. The extra closed captions are already showing up. So over the next 2 weeks, you will see that all of the videos will be closed captioned and all of the videos will have transcripts added to the web page as well, so that you can read through it if you want to. So yes, they are coming. They're just not there yet. These things take time to make that happen, but there absolutely will be transcripts. And I think what I'd like to be able to do with the latest version is to create a whole book of those, just the transcript book, so that people can just read through it if they wanted to, or have it in a PDF form. So maybe we can get that to happen as well, but certainly it'll be on the website. So I think that helps too. But a great question there. I know we're top of the hour, but let's do a couple more here to go through this list. Others that are there. The lot of what we have on the 009 exam, I think we've talked about. So a number of these are working through this. Here's a good one from Brant, because I think this is a question a lot of people are going to be going through. Since the 008 exam won't be discontinued until December, I took the 008 exam, but fell short. So I'm taking from that, Brant, that didn't quite pass that first time through. So Brant's question is, should I continue studying the 008, or should I start over with the 009? I think that's a really good way to put this question, by the way, because if you're moving from one exam version to the other, you are effectively starting over. There's a number of topics that are the same between them, but sometimes these new topics are interspaced inside of existing topics. So it's difficult to completely parse out what is new and what is old unless you've really gone topic by topic by topic and matched them up. And quite honestly, the 008, if you didn't pass that exam, there's an argument there that you still had other topics you needed to study for the 008. If you've already been studying for a particular version of the exam, and that exam version doesn't go away until 3 or 4 months down the line, then I would recommend just sticking with the exam version that you've already been studying. So in your particular case, Brant, you've been studying the 008. All of your study materials are for the 008. All of the books you have, all the videos you've watched, all of the hands-on you've been doing, everything has been based on the 008 exam objectives, I would keep going with the 008. Why would you restart this process? Especially since you've already taken the 008 exam. And although you didn't pass, this is still good intel. You now know what type of questions are asked. You know the style of questions you could get. You probably have questions that are going to come up again on the next version of exam. In fact, if you can remember anything from your previous exam, you should write things down. You should document what you remember from that exam, because that's good intel. You paid for that intel. So why not take advantage of that intel? Anything you can remember, document that, put it down so that you can reference that later. I will say that there are people that they see a new version of the exam. They think, what's new? It must be better. It's new. It's more timely, or there's some other reasoning they have to decide to get that version of the exam. I don't think a lot of those arguments work so well, quite honestly. I don't think those are really good reasons to shift gears to a new exam version, because you're effectively going to have to start over. You're going to have to get a new set of books. You're going to have to watch a different set of videos. You're going to have to do everything on this, get all new for that different exam version, because the topics are new. 33% of the 009 topics don't even appear in the 008. So a third of the exam is brand new, things you've never seen before. So that's a lot to now have to study. That's why I say stick with the 008. You already know it. You're familiar with it. You've got books for it. You've got videos you're comfortable with. Go use those topics. You've got until December. Now, if we were in the middle of November and the holidays are upon us and you realize you're not going to have time to get through it all, or you're really going to be pushing yourself to make that date, well, at that point, there might be a good argument to make on moving over to the 009. But we're a long way from that point. We are in September. You got October, November. You got 3 months left. That's a long time. As I mentioned, 2 to 3 months for someone just starting out to get through all of those topics. You've still got a lot of time. So I would say take the investments you've already made in 008. Don't throw that away. Use that investment. Keep going through the exam objectives. Use the exam results you got from the first time through. You may not even realize, if you log into your CompTIA account, you can look at your exam results from your first exam sitting. And it will list out, it won't show you the questions, but it will show you what subdomains did you get questions wrong. And you might find that most of the questions you got wrong were in the domain 3, or maybe most of the questions you got wrong were in domain 1. And it might even narrow down which topics were the ones that were most challenging for you. That gives you topics you can study a little bit more on. Maybe it will point out the weak points you had in your exams. Use that intel to be able to continue your studies with the 008. That's my personal recommendation. Everybody's got a different set of ideas. Everybody's got a different set of goals. There's not necessarily a wrong answer here, but I think from an efficiency and effectiveness perspective, I think sticking with the 008 makes a little bit more sense. I think later on, maybe making a change to the 009 might be a little bit different. The scenario is going to be different as we get closer to December, but I would not recommend changing at this point. I think you stick with the 008 and then see if you can get this thing passed before December. That's your goal. You've now got a deadline. And sometimes that's motivating too, to get through everything. And you've got intel. I think everything's really working for you for the 008. Throwing that all away and shifting gears to the 009, perhaps not the best move from a percentage passing perspective. I think our best chance for passing is to stick with the 008 at this point, knowing nothing else about your world. Knowing nothing else about this scenario, that's where I'm going on my recommendation. Let's see if we can fit in one more question. to get through these. Other things that are there. Let's do a couple. Let's start with this one. This is a quick one in and out. It's from Aaron, who asks, when the exams change and are redone, so when we go from a 008 to a 009, does the length of the entire exam change or does it stay the same? So if we're just talking about the exam, CompTIA does not tend to change the structure of their exams too dramatically. And in fact, you can kind of think that that would be the case. Networking has not changed a lot in 3 years. There's some new cabling types. We got a couple of standards that have been updated. Some things are different. Some technologies are more popular. Some technologies have faded. There's not a big difference. And that's why 30% of the exam is new on the 009. So not a big difference in content. And because of that, there's not a big difference in the structure of the exam. They tend to keep the domains very similar to the old domains. They aren't always exactly the same. There are changes here and there, but it's basically the same content and the same structure. In the case of the 008 and 009, I think the domains were exactly the same. And I want to say, well, and I know for sure, the grading is the same. The number of questions is the same. The style of the exam is exactly the same. So if you sat down and took a 008 exam and you took a 009 exam, you would find that functionally they work and look exactly the same. They're graded with the same grade scale. They have the same format. They have performance-based questions. They have multiple choice-based questions. They have the same maximum number of questions. Everything is the same in the style and format of those exams. The only thing that's different is the quantity of topics that could appear on the 008 is different than the quantity of topics that could appear on the 009. And there's some topics on the 008 that you won't find on the 009 and vice versa. So the exam objectives got updated, but the exams themselves, no difference in their length, no difference in their structure. It doesn't always have to be that way. CompTIA could come out someday and say, this new version of the exam is going to be very different. And they would tell us all about that. But they have not done that at all with any of their exams. I guess it makes sense, really. Once you have the right structure and you've set up this exam to work a particular way, why would you change the thing that works? It's working. So why not change all of that now? It just makes perfect sense. And let's also go with this question from James, who asks, I've been in the IT field for 11 years. What is the best cert to start to get now with all of this knowledge? So you've accumulated 11 years of information, and now we're ready to go to the next level in our career. And we tend to do this in IT. We tend to start at a particular point. Maybe we get that first job as a field service technician, as a help desk tech, as somebody at a network operations center. You've got that entry-level position. You got your foot in the door. And then you study, you keep learning things, and you move into a position where you're now working with the workstation team, and you're managing workstations in your environment, mostly Windows workstations. You've leveled up out of the help desk. When you get there, you may realize networking is interesting. I'd love to do more with networking. I talked to the networking team. They say I should get a Network Plus. They say I should get a CCNA. They say I should learn about switches and routers. So you do that, and they go, that's great. You now need to come on the networking team. You level up. So that's what we spend a lot of time in our industry doing, is learning as much as we can where we happen to be. We take that knowledge and we level up. And we do this often in IT. This is something that's not incredibly unique, but it is something that certainly positions IT as being very flexible. You couldn't do this, for example, if you were a doctor. If you were a doctor and you go go to school and as a general practitioner, that's what you're going to be for your career. If you're going to be a podiatrist, that's what you're going to be. If you're an ENT, that's what you're going to be. You can't really start in podiatry and then move into heart surgery. You don't tend to do that. You don't generally start as a podiatrist, then move into wrists. You don't really become that kind of person. Really, you stick with that. But in IT, we can now move around and do different things as the industry changes, as our personal interest changes, as our knowledge base changes. So we've got some decisions that we can make. Well, James's question was very specific about, I've been doing this a while now. How do I figure out how to level up? Where do I go to level up the best? What should I really pick? And the answer to that is you need to go to your particular geography where you live and look at what companies are asking for. Do companies want an emphasis in cloud computing? Do they want someone who's very knowledgeable in security? Are they looking for someone to roll out networks? Is it a big push into databases? Is somebody doing something ridiculous with AI? There's a lot of places where you can level up into that particular area. And now that's where you need to focus. It's not really about what I think the next step should be for you. It really isn't so much about what you think the next step should be for you, although that will certainly have an effect on this. If you were trying to level up and you want to take this knowledge that you've accumulated and leverage that into a new position, you need to find out what employers in your area are asking for. So in this particular answer, it's not going to be me giving you an answer. It's going to be me turning you around and pointing you towards the employers and giving you a shove to find out what they want. And this is going to take a little bit of work on your side. You may want to create a spreadsheet. You may want to list out all of the employers in your area that are posting on your favorite job posting sites. Pick whichever one you like the best, or even use multiples, and look for jobs in your area and see what they are asking for. Are there a lot of jobs asking about networking? Are there a lot of jobs asking about cloud computing? Is everybody wanting somebody knowledgeable with AI? Whatever it is, figure out what that happens to be. Figure out the part that fits best with your foundational knowledge of what you've done so far in the last 11 years and go after those positions. I think that's the one that's going to be important. Now, sometimes these positions are a little bit outside your wheelhouse. Maybe you've been doing all this work with Linux servers. You've been a Linux server administrator. You're very knowledgeable with the Linux server side, but you'd really like to get into networking. Well, networking has some part of it that is very Linux centric, but a lot of networking is about the protocols. It's about switching. It's about routing. It's about configuring all of these systems and making them all work together. So I think you need to find out what you want to do, combine that with what's available in your particular market, and go after that. And I think that's a good combination. I think having some foundational knowledge, but having some view that you want to learn more about this from people that are doing it. I think companies are very good at hiring people that are knowledgeable, but a lot of companies want to hire you at the beginnings of this journey for a couple of reasons. One is that they know they can teach you what they want you to learn in that time frame. They can also pay you a little bit less. So when it gets right down to it, it's all about money. And they know if you are just starting in, getting into that particular technology, but you know enough that you can be productive, well, that's a good combination for them. They can pay you at the lower end of the scale. You're happy to take the lower end of the scale because you're just getting into that particular world. And then you've got the job. And then, of course, you will learn everything you need to know about that job. You'll spend a year or two doing this. You'll maybe move up in that organization, or you'll move out to a different organization, making even more money if that's what you want to do. It's a common story. It's a common path. And it's one that you should always be thinking about. Even if you just started a new job, you should already be thinking about what the next thing is going to be. What do you want to get into? What are your interests? What technologies do you see coming down the road? What technologies is this company really working with that are going to make you a more valuable technologist? And I think all of those should go into your equations. And this is a set of equations, by the way, that's going to change as your career progresses. And when I started, I was field service tech. I got into workstation administration. I moved into networking and servers. Eventually it moved into a world of protocols and ultimately into security. I could not predict that looking at my very first job, that is where I would end up. but the industry changes under our feet. Technology is moving at a rapid pace, constantly moving. There's always new technologies coming down the road, some that are legitimate, some that are not, some that will be here for a very, very long time, some that will not be here for a very, very long time. Sometimes you have to learn all of them. There's a lot of technologies that I had to learn that I'm no longer using. Ask me again about my FDDI certifications. Ask me again about asynchronous transfer mode and how much time I spent on that one. And I can look at it. I can do a protocol decode of an ATM cell. No problem. Does that help me today? Not at all. Zero. But that's sort of the nature of our beast, is that we spend a lot of time learning what currently is important in these technologies. But what you will find is the things you're learning today, even though FDDI and ATM are not technologies we use anymore, the concept behind them are still being used in Ethernet and in our wide area networks that we're using today. So even though it's not top of mind, it's still information that you're able to use. The same Ethernet frame that I learned when I first got into networking is the same Ethernet frame we're using today, effectively. So that's why you should focus on technology, find the things you're interested in, see what employers in your area are asking about. I think that will go a long way into positioning you best for whatever that next thing is in your career. We're always working towards that next thing. You need to figure out what that next thing is and work your way towards that. You will be surprised that when you have a plan, when you've set a particular goal, you will be surprised how often you're able to meet that goal. And you will often be surprised when you're looking around at other people that aren't setting any goals at how they are absolutely meeting that every single time. So have a plan for success, because it really does amount to you being successful. If you never set a plan, you will never be successful with it. Always have a goal. A lot of the times you reach that goal. Sometimes you don't reach that goal. There's plenty of goals I've set with technology that I've never got to that point. But I think whenever you start working through those, it becomes very, very useful to become familiar with what you're wanting to do, what's available out there in the world, and then maybe we'll set some goals and things we want to be able to do in our future. So that is, I think, a great place to end up. We're getting a little bit over time today, but I think that's okay for most of us. I want to thank everybody for joining us on our live stream today. We have, of course, more of these that we're doing. We have a Security Plus study group next week. Make sure you come back for that one. That'll be on Wednesday of next week. And of course, we have more Network Plus study groups already planned for next month. Make sure you check the calendar for the next live event that is coming. That will be, of course, at professormesser.com/calendar. I want to thank everybody for joining us for our first hour and in the after show. We really enjoy putting together this content, and we love bringing it to you. It's always interesting to see the Q&A that we're having in that first hour. Sometimes I'm surprised, and it's always good to hear the questions you have for the second hour. We'll do the same format for our Security Plus study group next week. If you enjoyed this video, we would love it if you were to give it a thumbs up. I would also love it if you could subscribe to our YouTube channel. Head over there at professormesser.com/YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time on our Network Plus study group. See you then.